Now, our middle section requires my four colleagues, please, to come and sit up here on stage. Being kind enough to leave me the last chair over there, if you don't mind. Thank you. And I'd just like to hold up this splendid biscuit. This is not related to the next group that we're about to enjoy. To remind us that it is indeed Red Nose Day, and as we leave, there will be a bucket. So if you've got lots of lots of your own money you'd like to give away, that would be fantastic. So the way we're going to do this is that in a second, I'm going to invite, with his permission and agreement, of course, John Greystone to come and talk a little bit about the smaller board model in practice. And then when he's done that for 5-10 minutes, we're going to invite each of our panel members to give their kind of headline reaction to this issue. And then we're going to throw it open for debate and discussion with you. And all of that we're going to seek to do in 25 minutes. Does that sound doable? Yes. Let's give it a go. So please put your hands together and welcome John Greystone to the stage.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay, well, I've been given a brief to speak in a very short period of time, but Bill, I can ignore that because you're never going to invite me back anyway, so I'm going to ramble on for ages. But no, seriously, I'm actually from Wales, and I just want to start off by saying we're in a very different environment in Wales, and then explain the model we're looking at the moment for a smaller board, but with a membership body linked to it. So, those of you who haven't been to Wales, this is Wales. We have 25 colleges a few years ago. We have 19 at the moment, going down to probably 15 by this August. We've gone through a period of transformation, mergers between colleges, with universities, with private training providers. But we have a very, very different educational context to that in England. The two Michaels, we don't have Michael Wilshire and Michael Gove, have no authority over our side of the border. We have a different regime altogether. We have a single funding stream. We don't have different funding bodies. We still have education maintenance allowances. We have no academies. We have no free schools. We have no university technical colleges. Lecturers are paid at the same rate as school teachers. We have a different qualification system. And basically, education has devolved. And our key focus is partnership and not competition. But colleges will be getting the freedom you have from the Education Act of 2011. We're getting legislation which will be tabled very shortly, which will give us freedom in terms of governance. And we will be looking to explore the sort of models which have been discussed in this conference. So really, this is not our approach in Wales, the sort of competitive element. We're much more cosy, but there is a rigour in there as well, I should say. They have claws, so it's not quite as cosy as it looks. So the Welsh Government's Programme for Government, which came out 2011, saw reform of college governance as being one of the key aims of the legislation period. And they set up the Humphreys Review, reported in 2011. And this was very much in the context of the Labour government coming in, questioning incorporation. And Humphreys was set up. We were very nervous at the time. I won't go into the detail of how, what we did about that. But his review then looked at incorporation, but also explored the social enterprise model, but also the accountability of governing bodies. And basically, he argued for a smaller board. Now, not that small. I mean, he was arguing for 12, and one or two colleges are now looking to go for that size. He wanted executive directors. He wanted paid non-executives. The minister turned that down, but that will be an option in the future once this bill goes forward. And so that's not off the agenda. But his view was that a smaller board would only work if you had a larger membership body to give accountability to the local community. Because the major criticism of governing bodies in Wales was, to whom are you answerable to? Who appoints you? You scrutinise your senior management team, that's great. Who actually watches you? And he came up with the model based on Welsh Water, a social enterprise approach. And the purpose of what he called these membership bodies was, as you see in this slide, to increase engagement with and increase scrutiny and accountability to the local stakeholders and communities. So moving forward then, this is quite a simple model of governance. A smaller board could be 6, could go up to 12. Then it will include students and staff governors, drawn from a wide range of expertise as your boards are. So there wouldn't be categories of governors. We still have categories at the moment. That will, of course, change once the bill goes through. But it would be linked into a membership body. Now, he said it should be from 25 to 50. I think the criticism we had, it's a very large size body to get together. I mean, how on earth you can get 50 people interested in scrutinising the board? And those colleges who are looking to explore this model have actually had a much smaller membership body, probably 10, 14, 15, or whatever. And they would have complementary expertise. But their purpose would be to actually to hold the board to account. So the board then will be smaller. It would have a similar responsibilities as it does at the moment. One of the colleges, College Gwent, and I think Graham Pascoe is here from that college, they're having a smaller board, but it will meet 8 or 9 times a year. Humphreys was suggesting 6. Must have staff and students as members, whereas the membership body would be appointed by an independent search committee, and then it would challenge the board, holding it to account on the achievement of objectives. So in other words, it's saying, you as a board have set the strategy, you've set the senior management team to deliver that strategy, but have you actually done your job properly in terms of challenging the board? And this is what this membership body would do. It would also have a role in the appointment of governors, because we know we have search committees for governing bodies, but it's quite a mysterious sort of process how people actually get appointed to boards. So again, in the politics of Wales, it's very much it's a much closer, smaller country, and people are concerned about links to local communities, and that's a very strong political push in Wales. But it's strategic, not operational, and no mandation should take place. So what's actually happening again? So this report came out in 2011. We've now got the freedom coming out in the legislation, which would mean that colleges don't have to do this. A number of colleges are very interested in taking forward this model. It does actually emphasise a key role for the governance officer. So in Wales, the clerk would be called the governance officer, and I know one clerk has a governance officer department, so he's become God, and any clerk here would recognise the importance of role you have, a key role for the governance officer in bringing these two bodies together. But of course, the disadvantage is the risk of it becoming bureaucratic, yet another body in the way, etc., etc. So we're going to try this out and see if it will actually help make colleges more closely linked to their local communities. We want to avoid this happening. They need to be well managed. We don't want the membership bodies to become sort of whinging sessions. It's got to be constructive and positive. So, thank you very much indeed, Jock and Val. I'll probably extend this slightly with my 3 minutes, but I know you won't invite me again, so anyway, but I'll do it anyway. Thanks so much indeed.
Thank you. That was fantastic and really helpful. And now I'm going to invite my colleagues working down the row here just to introduce themselves and give us their sense of where they're coming from, any thoughts, any issues, any questions about this issue. And I'm going to start on my left.
I'm Jennifer Foote. I'm the clerk at Carlisle College, and I'm here because last summer Carlisle College undertook a review because of the Education Act, and I think they would recognise very much the slides that have just been presented, because they looked at primary care trusts and the models that they had. And again, they decided that in order to focus more on performance instead of conformance at a governance level, they needed to look to a smaller board, but a smaller board which would then have the duty to engage more frequently with key stakeholder groups, such as staff, students, community, and employer groups. And following due consultation, that was adopted in December and has been live from the 1st of January.
Thank you, and I think you're being modest because I think this is an area of your own master's research as well. Is that right?
It is, yes. Yeah.
And what are you learning from that?
I am learning, for me, the main freedom is that one size does not fit all. And I am grateful for the recognition that as a very tiny college in the far northwest, we can have a framework that suits us. and it might not suit a large regional college, but that's fine, it works for us. And I think that recognition that we can look at our community and say, how can we operate to discharge our responsibilities that suits our learner body and community best is a marvellous opportunity.
Thank you very much.
I'm Carol Stott, and I'm Chair of the Association of Colleges. I'm also Chair of the governing body at CityLit, and I've recently joined the governing body at City of Bath, which is my local college where I live. So my response, and it's interesting how the themes have been picked up throughout the whole conference, both in the workshops and in the plenary sessions. And the thing that strikes me is, picking up on the last point, is that one size does not fit all. I know from the 2 colleges I'm a governing body on, and I know from the colleges I go around and visit, that it's going to depend very much on your college and the context in which it sits, and what your vision and strategy for that college is, and then working out what kind of governance model is going to suit. So I think we've got to be very careful about avoiding a one-size-fits-all, whether that's size or structures, particular structures or models. I think the conformance-performance issue is a critical one for all governing bodies. It doesn't matter whether you're big or whether you're small, you've got to address the balance that the governing body pays, the attention it pays to steering and ensuring conformance, and making sure that the college is performing well and delivering on your strategy. I think that actually the other issue for me is around getting, the key issue is about getting the right people on the board. I always believe that if you've got good people on the board and they work well individually and as a team, and you look at that balance between performance and conformance, then you're much more likely to be effective in your context and in delivering your mission. So I think that's really critical. And for me, one aspect of getting the right people on the board is about the diversity and representation, and making sure, my experience has been, the more diverse you are in terms of skills and backgrounds and the people you have on the board, the more likely you are to get meaningful debate, and the more likely you are to be able to discharge that accountability. And just very briefly, sorry, I know I'm taking a bit long. The other thing about accountability is, in discussions I've been hearing in the workshops, there are lots and lots of different mechanisms and processes fit for the particular context of the college around accountability. And again, it's the one size fits all. The membership, or the membership structure might work very well as an accountability model in some contexts, but in other contexts you might need a much wider range of processes and mechanisms to make sure that you're really discharging that accountability.
Thank you. Sue.
I'm Sue Daly, and I'm the director of the Women's Leadership Network, and an erstwhile principal and a governor as well. And I think I'm here really to make sure that diversity is, as Carol's already pointed out, is considered in this. But I think I need to take a step back as well before we even talk about that, and think about the functions of the board and what's needed in terms of the range of skills and expertise to deliver the business success of any college. And we always talk about the range of skills, the professional skills that are needed. I think probably even more important for me are the other skills of analysis, evaluation, decision-making, challenging, all of those sorts of things, and leadership. And they don't always go hand in hand with professional skills and qualifications. And then on top of that, there's the question of diversity as well. And if you've read Lord Davis's report of February 2011, diverse groups make the best decisions, is the result of quite a lot of research. So you put all that together, you might think, well, you need an absolutely enormous board to deliver all of that. But actually, I will come down probably in favour of the smaller boards for some particular reasons. And this is not about reductionism, it's about concentration and focus for me. A small board, I think, can engage and get investment and ownership from its members in a way that a big board sometimes doesn't. And you do always, on a small board, you are always able to ensure that everybody's participation happens and people do invest in the decisions that are made. So I think I think that then gives us some real challenges in terms of recruitment, because if you're going to recruit people with all of those skills and achieve a range of diverse people on your boards, then you've got to have extremely good and sophisticated recruitment practices. So I think that gives us some issues that we might want to talk about. And one other thing that I'd just like to throw out as something that might prompt questions is this idea of stakeholder representation on boards. Because I would like to just suggest that there's some caution about that. We all want stakeholder involvement, but I think we've got to be aware of tokenism in that. And if you just think about what your student governors are able to contribute, it may be that you come to the decision, to the conclusion that there's a bit of tokenism about that. And are there other and better ways of getting stakeholder involvement in your board's decisions? Controversial, that one, perhaps.
Thank you very much. And you've written on the board 3 other areas to explore, just as if you didn't have enough. One was the notion of executive governors drawn from perhaps members of senior staff on the board. Another was the question really, does a smaller board lead to a more obvious team mentality? And then the flip side of that, how do you get breadth on a smaller board, which in a sense you've all been addressing. Who'd like to go first? Oh. If nobody's wanting to, I'm going to pass those questions that we've just had to my colleagues here. Just look again to see if anybody's busting to say anything. Yeah, hand here, sorry.
Yeah, if nobody else will start, I'll start it off. I've been talking around the conference, and it does seem that many governing bodies have whatever number, 20, 18, 16, etc. But at the end of the day, it's 6 or 8 people who actually are the movers and shakers. So do we actually suggest, does the panel suggest that we actually concentrate on those people, or is it more important to have the silent minority or majority almost sometimes because they are carrying messages back to various other points?
Very good. Who'd like to respond?
I have to say that that's not my experience. I have been on boards where that has been the case, but I'm also on a board of 20 where that is absolutely not the case. So I think it comes back to getting the right people on the board, and that means making sure you have people who understand their role, absolutely understand what that role is, and are committed to the organisation and committed to the role. And that's about recruitment. Recruitment you have to take very seriously. And it is in a big board it is partly about, how you manage the board and the meetings and the discussions. Because it's an unvirtuous circle. Because if you get to a position where it's always 6 or 8 people doing the talking and making the contribution, then everybody else sits back and lets them. So I recognise exactly what you're saying, because I've sat on a college board where I felt very much in that situation a long time ago, I have to say, but I've felt that, and I know from talking to other people that exists, but that doesn't have to be the case. If you evaluate your effectiveness, and if you're thinking about those things, I don't believe that has to be the case.
Thank you. Other colleagues? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's I agree entirely with what was said. It depends how well the boards are chaired and so on. But I actually did a PhD in FE governance. I'm a very sad person. I sort of get passionate interest in this. And I remember observing board meetings, and you're quite right, it tended to be 6 to 8 people in meetings who tended to dominate. Now, that may be something to do with the chair, but there is something called a magic number 7, that if a meeting gets more than 7 in size, the number of people participating doesn't go up at the same rate. Because if you look at a meeting of 2 hours, you can't have everyone contributing, because you can't, you don't get things done. And but that said, and maybe to argue against that, sometimes you need to probe the views of silent members, because their views are just as important as those who happen to talk a lot. And I think it does come down a lot to the skills of a chair. I just think a smaller board can be more focused and can concentrate on ideas better than a larger board. But if you do have a larger board, then make sure that you do listen to the views of the silent members, because often their views are very, very important and can actually... And also, I think what's also important is you want the dissident member. You want to almost encourage members to take the opposite view to avoid the sort of groupthink. So I think, again, don't try and get a group of people who all share the same sort of view. You want those people who can challenge, the convention of view coming forward.
Thanks. Sue?
There are different functions on boards, aren't there? I mean, 7 it seems to be a magic number. There's some American research that says that 7 is the optimum number for a group to make good decisions. But 7 is not going to accommodate all the skills and everything else that you need. But it could be the number of governors who take over a governing body, a big governing body, and tend to dominate it. I guess what I would like to advocate is a smaller core group of governors, not 7 probably is too small, but a small core group with an advisory group of those wider interests and those silent people who don't find it very easy to contribute to the bigger board meetings, but to use those as an advisory board or as specialist co-optees, and keep the decision making to that core group of really engaged people. I'm very passionate about the fact that governors ought to be passionate themselves about their colleges. They ought to be engaged and committed. And I think that's, if you're on a big board where some people are not contributing, you're either losing the passion of those silent participants or you're diffusing the decision making too much. I'm not a great advocate of big boards where some people don't speak.
Thanks, Sue. Jennifer?
Yep, I think that's entirely right. What we found from the Carlisle experience was that the smaller group, bonded as a team because it was more of a team number, but it was also able to, and it does go out and seek advice from advisory groups and focus groups, whether it's students, staff, employers, community leaders. So it's able to get a wide range of input on key issues, but then it's able to then take those back at a strategic level and apply it to college policy. And that's important because that way it's ensuring that it's not the person that speaks the loudest and the longest that is actually steering college policy. College policy is undertaken in a considered and articulate way, having taken a wide range of views from all key stakeholders, and that is actually proving, in the few months that we've been doing it, very, very useful.
Thank you. We've got time for one more question or a set of responses. Yeah, sir.
Ian Higginbotham from Myerscough College in Lancashire. One of the things, John, you did on the slide about ideal board sort of structures one way or another, the thing that I noticed was that they were all what I would call functional skills. You know, people who are lawyers or academics or whatever. And the thing that I'm as a chair of a corporation, I'm thinking more and more of, and we see very little training on it, is how to actually put together a board that can operate as a team. And in that, I mean, you need people that are visionaries on the board. You need people that are pragmatics on the board. You need people whose first instinct is always not sure of that on the board. And you need traditionalists on the board as well. And I'm actually increasingly convinced that it's actually that structure that is probably equally important to any of the functional skills. And I would just wonder how you consider that might be addressed.
Thanks. I'm going to invite John and then each panellist to say one more thing about that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the slides I put up were from the Humphreys review, and that was the view of Rob Humphreys, who chaired that view. I mean, I think I would agree with you, actually. I think it's getting a team together and getting the right individuals. And it's the risk of having governors with specific functional skills is that they try to intervene on those matters when it's probably the matter of management. So if I'm an HR expert, I think I've heard governors in the past, I can run this HR better than the college can, and we start interfering in that. So I think there's a risk if you bring in people with functional skills that they can get too close to the business in an unhelpful way. So I would see having an effective team led by an effective chair as being a really important part of an effective governing body. The only thing I would caution against is making sure you don't pick people all of the same sort of way of thinking. You want an effective team, but you want people who challenge in there, who won't necessarily go along with what the team actually think. And that's the risk. You bring in individuals who are like-minded.
Thank you. Sue?
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you. I tried to say something like that in my opening, really, that we're not just looking at professional skills. You've got to look at what Davis called in his report the intrinsics. And when you're recruiting for governors, really ought to be looking for intrinsics rather than professional skills, or as well as at least. So things like decision-making, challenging, all of those things, analysis, and being able to work in a group are really important. But I think even more important than those is actually being able to understand the business, because you may not need to be an accountant or a solicitor to be on a board. You may not need those skills because you can buy those in. Those are specific skills that you can actually co-opt in. But what you do need are people who are committed to understanding what colleges are about, what they're doing, what their mission is, what they really intend, because those are the things that actually should drive the strategy. And if you get people like that, then the professional skills, I think, probably are secondary.
Thank you. Carol?
I just think it's a really interesting question, and it struck me that it's what we do with our senior executive, isn't it? We have both. We have the functional skills, but we often look at those other qualities and then how they will work together as a team. So you've got those different attitudes, if you like, and characteristics. And I think it would be very interesting for all of us to kind of reflect on that when we're thinking about our own board composition.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Yeah, again, support it completely. We were lucky in Carlisle because it's such a small place that people are known even before they join the board anyway, so you almost know the people with the intrinsic skills as well as the professional skills. But again, I think sometimes you get lucky and people do meld as a team. But what's really useful is to make sure that they do have an understanding of the college as an educational institution, but you all know as governors that there's an awful lot of commitment that's expected of you. And you obviously are passionate about education, otherwise you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. So it's almost nurturing that and making sure that you have the support in place so you can understand the processes without necessarily being able to do the job. If we were Carlisle Widgets, I would expect a non-exec director to understand the process of widget making, but I wouldn't necessarily expect him to operate the machinery. And I think it's that sort of analogy that you need with governors as well.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, will you put your hands together and thank our panel? Thank you very much.